The inspection of the plumbing for the CommSop includes the main water supply and distribution, as well as identifying the backflow preventer. Backflow preventers are extremely important in a commercial building, more so than in a residential building, because of the dynamics that happen in a commercial building. Imagine if this building worked with chemicals or solvents or paints or anything else, that if that got introduced to the potable water supply of a municipality, we could contaminate it to an expense that we don't want to talk about. So all commercial buildings always have backflow preventers, and you need to begin your inspection with A, identifying where the main water supply comes in, and B, where the backflow preventer is. In this particular building, this is our backflow preventer right here. The water supply passes through it. We have a shutoff on this side, a shutoff on this side, and then it migrates into the other room. So we need to make sure that when you do your plumbing inspection, you trace all the potable piping to make sure that, again, we don't have issues of backflow prevention, things like cross-contamination, etc. So let's go trace the plumbing. In addition to tracing the potable piping, it's the one other standard you need to be mindful of is noting whether the water supply to the building is public or private. We're not testing the water supply, but we just should note whether it's a public system or a private system. While following the main water supply system, we see that it's left the other area, gone through the backflow preventer, comes up through here. We've got a primary sillcock here. This is basically for two reasons. One, it helps drain the system if we're doing any plumbing work. And two, you could also use it as a convenience hose. But in this case, this is a warehouse space. So in a warehouse space, we got to worry about the plumbing becoming in contact with freezing, depending on how they heat or don't heat the warehouse space. So that's why their plumbing pipe is in this insulated space. Here's a main water shut off here, and then the water pipe extends into a mechanical room. Let's go see what's in the mechanical room. As we follow the plumbing system further through the building, we come inside here, and here's some more of our distribution. Very specifically, now we've come across our water heater. This particular water heater is a high efficiency electric water heater. It is a commercial driven system. This is specifically to be used in a commercial property. It does have an exchanger on here that helps us extract, but it is electric. It actually is set pretty high. This is a commercial building. We'll find a lot of times that our water from the hot water production is set a lot higher than residential. This one's actually set at 130 degrees versus a resident, you might want to set at 105 or 110 degrees to prevent scalding. As we go through a commercial system like this, because we have a backflow preventer, we also need to have a thermal expansion tank on top of the water heater that helps regulate the system. We want to make sure on a system like this that it's free of rust, free of debris. We want to make sure in a system like this that if this was overhead, if this was up in the ceiling, it is within a drip pan. This is on the floor of a concrete building on the first floor. A drip pan is not required, albeit one could be installed, but it is not required. And so looking at the water heater, the only other thing we want to do is we want to verify that there is a pressure relief valve. We have a pressure relief valve, and that it is extended out into the proper location, which in this case is going into the mop sink. And so that would be an adequate location for discharging the water heater. The only other thing we would want to do is we would want to turn on the hot and the cold water at the fixtures. We'll talk about fixtures when we go into the bathrooms and go through the different plumbing fixtures as we go through the building. And we'll talk about testing the water there. Most commercial buildings also have a mop sink. The mop sink is a very good convenience sink for filling buckets, for emptying mop buckets, etc. In this particular case, we're dealing with a fiberglass resin sink. We're dealing with a sink with a standard standard drain on the bottom of it, and we're dealing with a faucet system that is overhead. That's what we want to have. But one of the issues we do have is we have an opportunity for cross-contamination. The cross-contamination would happen because we've installed this little bit of hose whip so that is down inside the flood rim of this basin. because it's inside the flood rim of that basin, if I was to fill that basin, clog the drain, water will slurp back up into this and contaminate the water system of the building. So in that case, I would recommend that this hose be removed, or if we would have had a vacuum breaker up here above the system, a vacuum breaker is another form of backflow prevention, and that vacuum breaker would be here above in the water system that prevents that water from backing up. We'll find similar vacuum breakers behind urinals in men's bathrooms and other systems. Sometimes we'll have this, and there could be a vacuum breaker hanging out the wall in a random location. That would be suitable and just fine for this apparatus. But in this case, I do not see a vacuum breaker at all. This would be an issue that I would want to flag for my clients. So I would run the faucet, I would turn on the hot, I would turn on the cold. One of the wonderful things about plumbing and the inspection of plumbing is it either leaks or doesn't leak. It doesn't kind of sort of leak or not sort of leak. It either leaks or it doesn't leak. So when you look at the plumbing through the whole building, you can pretty much, if we're running with static water pressure through the building, the issues will be very apparent. All you gotta do is trace the plumbing, look at it, know if we have a problem with it. During the plumbing inspection, the standards say we need to flush a representative sample of toilets, run a representative sample of fixtures. Now that could be interpretive. And so if we have a building that's got 5 restrooms, maybe your sample is flushing 3 of them, or whatever you deem as your personal sample. But just know that's what the sample is there for. But that doesn't exclude you from looking and entering and examining every bathroom in the building. That's very, very important, especially even for identification. I have found we've got 5 bathrooms in this building. I would probably flush and operate all 5. Another thing in the standard that's important is functional flow. That would be going in, turning on multiple faucets on the sinks simultaneously, flushing multiple toilets simultaneously, just to make sure there's enough flow in the building to distribute water and operate. Now, the inspection of a restroom can be embarrassing if you're not prepared. And so one of the things before you go to any bathroom, you want to give a little knock. You want to let people know that you're coming in. Hello. Now I have found you can do a couple different things. One, you can carry a wedge, and you can wedge the door. If this is a restroom that has 5 sets of commodes in it, you could be in there and somebody could come in after you. And so you want to make sure you coordinate that off. I carry a clip with me, and I like to clip the door, especially for female bathrooms. And so then that way the door is always going to be ajar and they'll know somebody's in there. So let's go do the restroom inspection. I'm going to begin by putting in a door stop. Now I have already gone through the building. I've got another sink running simultaneously. And so I'll come into the restroom and I'll turn the sink on. Cold water, make sure I have cold water. Turn on hot water. Make sure that I have hot water, which I do. That was very fast to recover. And then the other thing I want to do on every sink is I put just on all wall-mounted sinks, which most of these are, I want to put just a little bit of pressure on the bottom of it. We want to make sure that sink is not loose. A loose sink can fall off a wall. Most people, when you think of a sink like this that's wall-mounted, when you wash your hands, you're leaning on the sink, and that loosens them up in time. And again, it's either loose or it's not loose. It's not a little loose. And so noting that on for your client, just a little bit of touch, this is solid. Make sure the toilet is solid to the floor. Most cases, this is going to be a concrete floor, but if it's a wood floor, they can rock as well. We'll just make sure it's nice and solid. I give the toilet a little bit of flush. I want to listen to it. I want to watch it. Make sure there's no gurgling or reverberation through the system, which would indicate we've got a problem with our vent stack. And then make sure it fills and shuts off. Then next we want to do is we want to make sure there's some form of exhaust. Bathrooms can become unpleasant over time depending on usage. And in this particular case, we do have an exhaust. The exhaust could be local, which this one is, or it could be a major plumb system up through a vent, all the way through the roof where there's a static vent on the roof. In this case, this particular fan operates on a motion sensor, and so we have that, and then it would shut off over a period of time. Once I've done with that, I go to my next bathroom, then my next bathroom, then my next bathroom, and then repeat that service over and over again. And meanwhile, while I run to my next bathroom, I want to make sure the plumbing's off, and I got to run and shut the plumbing off of the other one. I'll meet you guys at the water fountain. A lot of buildings have water fountains, especially buildings pre-COVID. During COVID, this was one of the things that to get a building to be safe, they'd always cordon these off because they were always worried about germs and transmissions and things like that. The one thing that you don't think about with water fountains, especially this type, which is a refrigerant type, is it is trying to cool the water. So when the water comes out of here, it's not tap cold, it's cold. There's our motor. One of the problems that we have with water fountains is if they're not used on a regular basis. I wouldn't necessarily be afraid of a water fountain that's located in a gymnasium where 100 athletes are using it an hour. But on a situation like this, where this water fountain could sit here for a day or 2 or 5 or 10 days between use, that water becomes stagnant, becomes stale, becomes bacteria latent. What we worry about is Legionella and Legionnaire's disease. And when that water comes out of it and it aerates, then that becomes something that can get somebody sick. So in many cases, I will operate the water fountain as part of the plumbing, but I will usually add a comment into my report that describes these and in a description that talks about Legionnaire's disease. And there's other ways now you can distribute drinking water to your employees and your clients that doesn't involve a water fountain. And if you are going to use a water fountain, again, these ones that are super chill, they're great, but they have to be used. If you have one that doesn't chill, but maybe it's just a dispenser, maybe it's a water fountain that comes from the tap that fills in a portable water bottle, then those are a different animal. But we do have to make sure that we look at water fountains as part of the plumbing inspection. Also within the standard, we need to look at drain stoppers and make sure that they're present and functioning. And so I would want to exercise the drain stopper up and down, make sure it works unencumbered, holds the water, and then discharges the water. Then throughout the rest of the bathroom, we might have some other features in it. This particular bathroom does have a towel dispenser and a toilet roll dispenser. If those are the case, we want to make sure those features are firmly attached to the wall, not broken, and not kind of laying akimbo or askew. And so we want to make sure for that. But part of the standard, though, we do want to double check and make sure, again, cold is on the right side, hot is on the left side, and we have got functional flow through both systems. When inspecting the commode, again, we need to flush a representative sample of the commodes. And then we need to make sure that they're tight to the floor and the basins are free of cracks, including the tank lid, the side of the basin. These are porcelain, they can crack. They can crack from impact, they can crack from heavy wear, they can crack from being over tightened. So we want to make sure, again, they're tight to the floor, they're free of cracks, and they're free of any damage. And by all means, they flush normally. The restroom inspection is technically part of the plumbing inspection. But you could, in certain instances, or however you want to design your template, make a whole separate section for restrooms. You might, in multifamily, have a whole separate section for bathrooms or restrooms, or however you want to describe them. That's the beauty of being able to design whatever template and reporting system you would like to have. But when talking about restrooms, this is largely found in the plumbing section of the CommSop. Through the CommSop, there is a mandatory that you should test a representative sample of the commodes. We also need to test a representative sample of all the sinks. We should verify functional flow of the plumbing, both hot and cold water, as well as reviewing the commodes for cracks, being securely fastened to the floor, or any other damage that might be present. Also, if you think of a commode, we also need to think of urinals. Now, going beyond in the restroom. There's a lot of other features in commercial structures we might not find in residential or multifamily. That includes the privacy stanchions that are between the units. Those are very costly, so they should be well secured to the wall. And then we might have hand dryers, sanitizers, dispensers of various types throughout the bathroom. So we want to make sure we look at those. So with that, let's begin our restroom inspection. First thing we're going to do is many restrooms you go to, maybe there's something out of order. You'll have a sign, you'll have tape, you'll say do not use. That's something you would want to take a picture of and let your clients know that you did not inspect that commode for that reason. If we have a bathroom or restroom that is an accessible space, then that's why one urinal is taller than the other urinal, is because one urinal has to be no greater than a specific distance off the floor. And so I would go over and I would simply flush the appliances to make sure they operate, make sure water flows, make sure water doesn't leak. It's very common on these to have leaks at any of the plumbing and any of the systems. So we want to verify that it operates. And then you'll figure out some system as you walk through the rest of the restroom. I'll enter the restroom. I'll make sure the toilet is solid to the floor. I typically do that with the side of my leg versus getting down there and shaking it. I'll look for cracking. I flush the commode, verify the toilet roll dispenser is secure, and then look at the walls to make sure they're tight. These doors should open inward versus outward. Outward will hit somebody in here. Inward allows it to open inside. And then there is a security lock on that door. And so we want to verify that. And then we move to the next one. This is an accessible stall. And so it's very important that unlike a conventional stall, this opens outward. It opens outward because if you were in a chair or if you needed accessibility concerns, you can exit safely. And so then we come over to this. I would exercise and make sure that this isn't loose. And then I, again, flush the commode, verify the toilet paper dispenser is tight, check out the walls, make sure there's a lock, and I would close the door. I have a dispenser here. If you're noticing, I'm just making a circle around the space. Maybe some I go one way, some I'll go the other. Make sure this dispenser is tight, and then I exercise my sinks. With sinks, they should be secure to the wall, making sure that they're not loose. Verify that they're that. I have hot water and cold water, so I will verify if I have hot and if I have cold, and if they're properly aligned, cold on the right, hot on the left. I verify that. Check out any other dispensers we might have. Look at the mirrors to make sure they're not broken. All restrooms should have ventilation. The ventilation is either automatic or permanently on. This particular case, this ventilation is operated by a motion sensor, and it operates for a specific period of time, and this is exiting up through a trunk system on the roof. If we have GFCI outlets, we want to test and reset those as well. That would be part of your electric inspection, but if we're in the bathroom, I make that part of my restroom inspection as well. Once I'm finished with that, then I would vacate and move on to the next restroom. It is very important that you go and you inspect every restroom in the building. Some restrooms, and this is up to you and your template, you can do individual restrooms or you can lump all the restrooms together. That's your call, that's your choice. But it's important for you to identify and inspect every restroom in the building. Follow the ComSop and you'll do a great job. We began talking about the plumbing in this building by first identifying where the plumbing came into the building. Then we talked about we need to identify whether it's public or private. Now, with a public water system, we talked about how it has to have a backflow preventer, and we showed that downstairs. The reason the backflow preventer is so important is so we don't contaminate the system, right? If anything happens. So these are two excellent examples I'm about to show you of why a backflow preventer is so important. We have a water dispensing system here. This is hooked up to the potable system. What's inside of here is not a 5-gallon jug, but it's actually hooked up to the water system, and there's a reverse osmosis filtering system inside of this that is filtering all the water for the employees and guests of this building. On top of that, we've also got a very nice coffee machine. That coffee machine is hooked directly to a water source. And so any one of these two devices, the ice maker on the counter, all of these are examples of things that can, if they fail, damage the plumbing system, not to the system necessarily, but contaminate the rest of the community. And so that's why it's so important to look at backflow preventers as well as these appliances. Also included in your plumbing inspection, you should look at shower doors if one is installed. Remember with shower doors to make sure it opens outward, not inward. If it opens inward and you fill it up with water, then you have an aquarium that you're trapped in, which is not someplace you want to be. Then you also want to look at any of the other plumbing devices that might be included. When you're in the basement of the crawl space, if there's a sump pump, you want to make sure you test those. You also want to follow the waste system. If there's an ejector system, you want to test the ejector system, make sure it operates. If there are any tanks present in the building for fuel storage, just to note that they're present, not necessarily to inspect that they're there. But it's important to follow the CommSop as close as you can, because that is your greatest tool that you have. If you have questions about the plumbing system, please refer back to the CommSop and any other literature we've provided.